Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Food and Water Watch's August Livable Future Live. Toxic Silence, a fight against legal immunity for pesticide companies. My name is Janine Shepard, and I will be your host this evening. I am Food and Water Watch's Senior Manager of Philanthropy Events, and I'm honored to be here with all of you. As people are joining, please take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat. We'd love to see your name, where you're joining us from, and what brings you here today. For any of you new to Food and Water Watch, welcome. We are a national organization fighting for sustainable food, clean water, and a livable climate for all. We organize for grassroots activism at all levels of government, local, state, and federal, and we create the change and the solutions that we need. This year marks our 20th anniversary year, and we are proud to have 20 years of wins for clean food, clean water, and a livable climate. And for any of you new to Livable Future Live, welcome. This is our monthly educational webinar, and each month we focus on a different topic relevant to our livable future. Tonight, as you know, we will be talking about the fight against pesticide companies who are proposing legal immunity for the harms their products have been accused of causing. Next month, on September 17th, we will be discussing artificial intelligence and the environmental and health harms brought to us by big tech. And on October 15th, I am excited to talk to authors Sharon Udison and Rachel Frazen about their new book, Poisoning the Well: How Forever Chemicals Contaminated America. If you haven't heard of this book yet, I highly recommend you check it out and sign up for the event. And we'll put a link for both of those in the chat. Before we get started, I want to take a moment to acknowledge that we are coming together in community today with a diverse set of backgrounds, perspectives, and experiences, but with a common belief in the importance of fighting for clean water, a sustainable food system, and a livable future for all. As you share your thoughts and questions in the comments, please make sure to keep them respectful. We do have someone monitoring the chat, and we'll ask anyone not abiding by this request to leave the event. A few quick notes about Zoom before we get started. If you would like to turn on closed captioning to add subtitles to your screen, click the Show Captions in your Zoom toolbar, and we'll add instructions for that in the chat as well. Please use this chat box throughout the evening to share your thoughts and your reactions to what you're hearing. The chat is also where we will share information and links, so keep an eye out for those. And you'll also see a Q&A box. If you have questions for any of our speakers tonight, please put those in the Q&A box so we are sure to see them. We have set aside some time near the end for Q&A. And finally, I am recording this event, and I will share the recording with you in an email that I will send out tomorrow. Tonight, we'll be talking about the steps that pesticide companies are taking to put their profit over the health of people and the environment. And we'll talk about our wins against them, as well as the work ahead to continue the fight. We couldn't do any of that without people like you, stepping up to take action. It's in coming together and joining forces that we get this work done. So thank you for being here. There are a number of ways that you can get involved with our work, including joining our volunteer network, attending our events, and making a donation. We don't take any corporate funding, so we are not beholden to any special interests other than the health of our communities and our planet. Our support comes from people like you. If you're able to give today, please do. And thank you so much for your generosity. And with that, I'd like to introduce tonight's topic. Over the past 5 years, big ag pesticide companies have paid out billions of dollars nationwide to settle lawsuits alleging that their products are linked to increased cancer risk among consumers and farmers who use them. This year, a number of these pesticide companies, including Bayer, the maker of Roundup, have attempted to gain legal immunity from future health-related lawsuits. We're calling it the Cancer Gag Act. And one of the main battlegrounds for this fight so far has been here in my home state of Iowa. Joining me tonight is fellow Iowan Nick Shute, who, like so many of us here in rural Iowa, grew up feeling perfectly safe on a family farm, playing in streams and waterways. And now 17 of his close family members have received a cancer diagnosis in the past few decades. We'll also hear from our Food and Water Watch, our food.
Hello.
Hi, just a second. I'll be right there with you. We'll also hear from Food and Water Watch researcher Kat Ruane, who wrote a fact sheet about the Cancer Gag Act, and Iowa organizer Jennifer Breon, who will talk about the work she has helped lead and win against these pesticide companies here in Iowa, and how we're taking everything we learned in that fight to continue to win on the national scene. If you have questions as we go, please feel free to write them in the Q&A box, and we have set aside time near the end for Q&A. Before I introduce Nick, our first speaker, I want to acknowledge that his story is a difficult one to hear, and certainly a difficult one for him to live through. I never want to sensationalize anyone's story to make a point, but I am always honored to provide a platform for stories that need to be heard. I think Nick's is one that needs to be heard. So thank you for being here to witness this story, and thank you for listening. And with that, let me introduce Nick. Nick Shute is calling in today from Alden, Iowa. Nick, thank you so much for being here today. In my introduction, I mentioned your seemingly idyllic childhood, along with some pretty jarring statistics about illness in your family. Could you introduce yourself and tell us what brings you here today, and why is it important to you to tell your story?
Thank you, Janine. Like Janine said, my name is Nick Shute. I'm calling from Alden, Iowa. I grew up on a family farm. In addition to my current job at Hamilton County Solid Waste, I also farm part-time on our family farm. Family is very important to me, and the farm is an excellent place to bring up grandkids back to and spend some quality time with them, as I do have 5 granddaughters. As you said in your introduction, we grew up riding bikes with our friends out to the creeks and ditches to catch tadpoles and play in abandoned fields and waterways. We drank water from an old hand pump in one of those fields. It seems like a carefree childhood at the time. But I look back at it with horror, because I also remember seeing rusted out chemical cans that held toxic herbicides in the same ditches, in waterways, and behind the local co-op where we used to catch tadpoles. And now, after the past few decades, 17 of my close family members have suffered from cancer. When I asked my family if I could share their stories, they said, "Share the story, please. Share the stories." My family's scared. My neighbors are scared. I want people to know what is happening.
Thank you. I've heard you talk about how important your family is to you. Take us back to the call your mother received from her sister in 2013 and the series of events that led you to be here today.
Well, like I said, my family is very important to me, like I'm sure it is to all of you. My family is very close and live close by here in central Iowa. One day in 2013, my mom got a call from her sister, my aunt. She was admitted to the hospital with what we thought was a set of kidney stones. But later on, the diagnosis went to show that she had a kidney with a mass on it, which was cancerous. So after some discussion, she went under surgery and her kidney removed without any further complications. Her family dodged a bullet and didn't need further treatment. Unfortunately, a year later, my mom was diagnosed with the same symptoms. So mom took advice from her sister, and nevertheless, mom had the same kidney cancer as her sister did. But not only did she have kidney cancer, but she also had bladder cancer as well. They removed mom's kidney, and she's still receiving treatment for bladder cancer. And as far as I know, the only treatment for that is to burn off the new growth that appears. As far as my father goes, he's had his bouts of cancer as well. Suffering from being a male with breast cancer, with removal of his right breast, which is rare in a male. He also had a bout with prostate cancer, with rounds of chemo and radiation to treat. I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters. One brother had his thyroid removed because of cancer, and the other brother had a parathyroid with a growth on it that had to be removed. My youngest sister had abnormal cervical cells, what prompted a hysterectomy and a double mastectomy. She's my youngest sister who never had the chance to have any children. What else could happen? Last year, my oldest sister, Tammy, who was 57 years old, she's a nurse, a mother of 2 kids, a grandma of 8 grandkids, went in for a checkup for low energy. She came out knowing that she had a cancerous kidney. What's the chance of 3 family members having a cancerous kidney? Tammy is a fighter. She did everything the doctors told her to do. She took every treatment she is advised to take. Tammy's cancer spread from her kidney to her liver and finally to her lungs. She passed away almost a year after being diagnosed with cancer at the age of 56, which is way too young for anyone. With all of her history, the grandkids have been told to get checked out if they're experiencing any symptoms. I found myself having issues with back pain and issues with bladder. I went to get checked out in October of 2024. I listed my family history and my symptoms, and an ultrasound was issued. And a cyst was revealed, not on just one of my kidneys, but both, as well as some prostate issues, which we were planning the stage for treatment. But with all the bouts of cancer in my family, plus numerous cases on my father's side, when does someone or some agency or medical clinic take notice that this is not right? They're too much directly tied to my family and tied to this area. After all, Iowa is ranked number 2 in the nation for cancer.
Right. Yeah, science tells us that cancer risk is determined by a number of factors, including lifestyle, genetics, and the environment. And we know that research has shown a strong link between the use of certain pesticides and herbicides and an increased risk of cancer. And we know that Iowa has the 2nd highest rate of cancer in the nation. And Kat will go into those statistics when she presents the research. But what does this information mean to you as someone who has seen so many family and community members battling cancer?
I truly believe the chemicals in the water we drank and were exposed to are a major factor in how much cancer we've had in our family. We all grew up on rural water.
Nick, you said that you currently work at the Hamilton County Solid Waste Department, and it's my understanding that if a chemical spill happens there, it would have to be reported. I've heard you use this point to talk about the difference in accountability between someone who works for the county versus a multinational chemical company. Can you share your thoughts on that comparison?
Well, I feel like we need accountability here in Iowa. Where I work at the Hamilton County Solid Waste, we have a hazmat program. We are required to do continuous education on the chemicals and spills we come in contact with and have happen on site. The Iowa DNR says any spill over 5 gallons in quantity is a reportable offense. So how is it 5 gallon is a reportable offense to the DNR, but farmers can apply thousands of gallons of glyphosate, Roundup, and the DNR and EPA are fine with it? At the end of the day, multinational chemical companies like Bayer should be held accountable just like the rest of us.
And that brings us to the Cancer Gag Act, this bill that pesticide companies like Bayer are trying to push through to give them immunity from future health-related lawsuits. And Jennifer will talk more about that bill and how we've been fighting back. But as we're listening to Kat's research and Jennifer's organizing work, what would you like people on this call to know about the potential of immunity bills like this?
Bayer lobbied our Iowa legislators with a bill to eliminate lawsuits brought forth from damages of cancer diagnosis caused by their products. This is not right. This is not right for the families that have suffered so much already with the loss of the family. This is not right for the families. This is not, sorry here. Many of the lawsuits brought against the pesticide companies have been proven to have merit. Iowans who are in similar situations deserve to be made whole. There are several jobs that deal with the chemicals produced under the Bayer name, whether it's a farmer doing application himself, someone who ran a chemical tender for the co-op, in which I had many years doing that, or someone who just went out and bought a small amount to spray on the cracks of the sidewalk for uncontrolled weeds. or how the majority of the people ingest the chemicals through their water. What would it be worth to you if you lost a loved one to cancer? My sister, who passed away, had so many people depending on her being a nurse. A grandma, a mother. How do you place a value on that? Bayer shouldn't be writing the rules for us here in Iowa or anywhere else. It's up to a judge to decide whether a lawsuit has merit. And a bill like the Cancer Gag Act would take away rights to pursue that option. That's why I'm strongly urging you to learn about these pesticide companies that are trying to do everything they can to stop it.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you for sharing your story, and thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you again, Nick. Next up, I would like to introduce Kat Ruane. Kat has been a researcher here at Food and Water Watch for 3.5 years, producing hard-hitting research on pesticides, Iowa biogas, and more. She is the author of our newest fact sheet, the Federal Cancer Gag Act, Pesticides Over People. Kat, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much, Janine. I'm happy to be here. And thank you so much to Nick for sharing his really powerful story. I am going to share my presentation. There we go. So, like Janine said, I'm going to talk a little bit about the research Food and Water Watch has been putting out on this bill and the proliferation of pesticides in this country. So to open up, I just want to show the text of the bill that we're calling the Iowa Cancer Gag Act. So Jennifer's going to go into this in a little bit more detail, but just to provide the context, what this is essentially saying is that any label put on a pesticide by the EPA is sufficient for a company's duty to warn. And what duty to warn means is that the company has a responsibility to test its products and warn consumers of any dangers that this product may present. So with this bill, it's essentially barring future lawsuits against pesticide companies for failing to warn that their product could cause cancer or any other health impact. I'll also note pesticide is a very broad category, right? So even though a lot of what we're going to be talking about today would be glyphosate or Roundup related, these bills would apply to all pesticides. And if you're here tonight, it might not be a huge surprise to you, but the big name behind these bills is Bayer, so that maker of Roundup. They've been lobbying for these in Iowa and across the country. They're also in turn supported by something called the Modern Ag Alliance, which has really only sprung up around these bills. This is a group that's funded and founded by Bayer, so really just another propaganda arm of this campaign. And that group has been maintaining a website, running ads about how important it is to protect pesticides and how vital this bill is, and really just going all full in on this campaign. So to understand the scope of the pesticide problem, I pulled some of the top line numbers from our research. So across the United States, there are about 434 million pounds of herbicides applied to just corn and soy every single year, plus an additional few million pounds of things like insecticides or fungicides. Typically, farms will apply herbicides to 96% of corn and soy acreage, much less when it comes to those other two I just mentioned. But of these herbicides, glyphosate-based ones are the most widely used. So we have about 88 million pounds applied to soy and about 75 million pounds applied to corn. I also have a few other popular herbicides here down at the bottom, because like I said, these bills would apply to all pesticides. And as Nick was telling us, nowhere is really more impacted by these than in the agricultural heartland. So that's places like Iowa, where we find that in an average year, over half the land area of Iowa is covered in glyphosate, right? So that's about 20 million acres, give or take. And with that stat in mind, I'll do a quick review of what got us to this point. So taking it back to the 70s, 1974, Monsanto introduces Roundup. It's introduced as a broad spectrum herbicide, meaning it essentially kills everything it touches. This obviously limits how much you can spray it, right? You don't want to kill your crop. So Monsanto swoops in again in the 90s to solve this problem that they've essentially created. They debut the Roundup Ready crops in 96, which are genetically engineered to resist Roundup. It starts with cotton and soy and corn seeds and expands from there. And again, because it resists Roundup, you can spray more, and it sets the stage in the 2000s for dramatic increases in how much Roundup could be applied. Right, so now you can spray it 1 to 3 times after the crop emerges, which is a pattern that couldn't happen before. So throughout the 2000s, you have quantity sprayed and acreage sprayed both on the rise. And now these resistant crops make up the majority of corn, soy, and cotton seeds, among a few other types. These are also now largely resistant to other herbicides like dicamba, for example, another product of Bayer's. Fast forward a little bit, the 2010s are also big years. So on one hand, you have the International Agency for Research on Cancer releasing their really bombshell finding that glyphosate is probably carcinogenic, which I will explain a little bit more in a moment. But on the other hand, you also have Monsanto working behind the scenes to sabotage research and derail agency reviews about glyphosate. So during this period, Monsanto is also working to essentially create a repertoire of independent scientists, which really means buying off research to shed favorably on their products. In 2018, Bayer acquires Monsanto for $63 billion in what some have called one of the worst mergers of all time. And in that same year, a school groundskeeper named Dwayne Johnson prevails in his historic lawsuit, which alleges that glyphosate and Roundup caused his cancer. His victory essentially helped set the stage for a wave of lawsuits after this. And so in 2020, you have Bayer settling over 95,000 lawsuits for $10 billion on this issue. That includes no admission of wrongdoing or liability, right? But it's still one of the largest settlements of its kind. So where are these coming from, right? What is the basis for these lawsuits? As I mentioned, the IARC decision was a huge factor in that. It names glyphosate as a probable carcinogen, or group 2A, specifically as it relates to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So what this essentially means is that there's strong evidence for the cancer-causing properties of glyphosate and the association between the two, but that other conclusions cannot be completely ruled out. But the decision still concludes that glyphosate likely causes genotoxicity and induces oxidative stress, both of which are precursors to cancer. More recent meta-analyses support this, right? So a 2019 study found that high exposure to glyphosate results in a 41% increased risk of NHL. As Nick said, these cancers are at crisis level in Iowa, and we know that cancer is a huge, huge problem with these pesticides, right? So like he said, Iowa has the fastest growing rate of new cancers and second overall in cancer incidence. Aside from the cancer, there are also other health impacts associated with glyphosate, right? It's an endocrine disruptor, it's linked to reproductive issues, birth defects in children, it's been linked to developmental problems, just a lot of issues with it overall. And then it's also important to note, right? Roundup is not pure glyphosate. It is mixed with other chemicals, it's co-formulated to make the Roundup product. And what the evidence suggests is that with these co-formulants, it may be even more dangerous than glyphosate on its own, right? So in one litigation argument, a toxicologist testified that Roundup was actually 50 times more genotoxic than glyphosate, which is something to keep in mind for later. Like I said, the narratives and a lot of what we're discussing have been focused on glyphosate, but these bills impact all pesticides. And they come with their own variety of health risks, including cancer. Dicamba, another pesticide produced by Bayer, is also associated with a number of cancers: lung, colon, liver, and prostate. And then for pesticides as a class, you have other health effects like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, reproductive disorders, respiratory problems, DNA damage, and organ failure. The list just really goes on. And all of these would, of course, be covered by these Cancer Gag Act bills. And a lot of this hinges on the belief that EPA standards and labels are sufficient to protect you, But what happens if they're not? Right, so we all know right now that the EPA is being defunded and slashed. Lee Zeldin is pursuing a deregulation agenda, capitulates to industry. But the EPA registration process has had a lot of flaws even before now. Right, so in general, the EPA registration lags significantly behind other countries when it comes to regulation. As of 2016, the US was still routinely spraying 322 million pounds of 72 different pesticides banned in the EU. We can look to something like paraquat as an example, right? Banned in the EU, banned in the UK, banned in China, still approved in the US. But as for the process problems, for one, it largely relies on industry-sponsored studies. So in the case of glyphosate, Bayer-sponsored studies. There's very little third-party involvement in these, which is a huge conflict of interest. Another big point is that the EPA process fails to account for those coformulants, right? So that testimony about Roundup being more genotoxic than glyphosate, that's not included in those decisions. Another thing that it fails to account for is misapplication, which is a huge issue for residential application or for at-home use, right? So most of the Roundup lawsuits that we have are from residential use, where people may not receive proper training, they may not have PPE, they may not know how to safely apply this product, and you don't have the protocols. That's all not accounted for in this process. They just assume perfect, good application, which we know is not the case in reality. Outside of the process itself, the EPA is very reluctant to revoke approvals once they issue them. So of the 134 pesticide ingredients that have been canceled since the 70s, only 37 of these were unilaterally revoked by the EPA, right? The rest are the companies voluntarily taking them off the market. And only 5 of these have occurred since the 2000s, right? So that's clearly a major problem that shows deference is still to the pesticide industry and that the EPA is not willing to take that authority. And then finally, these labels focus on acute symptoms. They focus on things like, what do you do if you get it on your skin, if you get it in your eye, if you get it in your mouth, right? They don't tell you 20 years down the line, you may have cancer. Huge problems, huge oversights. And considering all of this and that the EPA does not fully consider these harms in advance, people are then forced to rely on litigation after the fact. So Bayer has questioned this legality, this litigation, right? They've built it up to be some fraudulent thing. But these are very real cases, and many of them are successful. These lawsuits are primarily based on that failure to warn, so that very thing that would be banned by these bills. And as these individual cases continue to pile up, the strength of a plaintiff's case increases, right? You're continuing to build the evidence against Bayer, and it kind of snowballs. They have consistently appealed decisions that don't go their way, and they're looking to seek a favorable decision from the Supreme Court in the next few years. Jennifer will get into kind of the moving pieces of a lot of this push nationally a bit later, but this has really been an all hands on deck moment for the pesticide industry. And as a part of that, they're spending big, right? So our research found that from 2023 to Q2 2025, Bayer spent $21.3 million on federal lobbying. That's on a variety of issues, but it includes the federal version of the Cancer Gag Act, which is the Agricultural Labeling Uniformity Act, as well as the Farm Bill, which they've tried to shove this language into there as well. And this number is a 43% jump from the same time period preceding it. So it's ratcheting up that spending. As I mentioned before as well, some have called Bayer's merger with Monsanto one of the worst in history, and the data is not looking so great for them. So since 2018, when they acquired Monsanto, their net income has plummeted 250%. The company operated at a net loss in both 23 and 24, and the crop science division, which is where the glyphosate sales are hosted, has seen their earnings plummet nearly 200% in the same time period. And Bayer's CEO has publicly said, right, the company takes billions in annual losses just due to the sheer volume of litigation against them. As this is happening, they're still spending big to try to block that, right? So, like I said, they have the federal lobbying side where they're lobbying the House, the Senate, the EPA, USDA, every agency you can think of. And then they're also doing it at the state level. So we found that in Iowa, Bayer registered 7 lobbyists and spent about $210,000 in the 2024 and 2025 reporting cycles. And this is a 400% increase compared to the money spent in the previous 2 cycles. Just a massive, massive increase to push for this bill. In Florida, they spent $100,000 on lobbyists from 2024 to June 2025, and it's happening across states with these type of bills. Now, Bayer as a company does not make candidate contributions, but they do have an employee PAC that essentially funnels money to those candidates. And we found that over the same time period, so January through June 2025, the PAC and its state affiliate spent $700,000, with more than a quarter of that occurring in the first half of 2025. So again, ramping up on that spending. Nearly 70,000 of that went to sponsors or co-sponsors of the federal Cancer Gag Act bill, and over 250,000 of that went to states with these Cancer Gag Act bills happening in 2025. And what this shows us is that we are up against really, really big money here, which just makes the win in Iowa all the more important and all the more just incredible work. So that is all from me, and I will pass it back to Janine to introduce Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Kat, for this explanation and these really revealing stats. Our final speaker this evening is Jennifer Breon. Jennifer is an Iowa organizer with Food and Water Watch. She grew up on a farm here in rural Iowa and has led the fight against pesticides in Iowa. Tonight, she is going to tell us about how she did that, what we've learned, and what we're going to do now to prepare for a national fight. Jennifer, I will hand it over to you.
Thanks, Janine. I'll just share my screen here. All right, so I'm based in Iowa City, and my colleague Michaelin is in Des Moines. And sometime in the fall of 2024, we started noticing advertising in Iowa promoting glyphosate from Bayer, the maker of Roundup. There was a glyphosate billboard in Des Moines. Someone called the Modern Ag Alliance took out full-page ads in newspapers around the state, thanking state legislators for standing up for farmers by supporting Senate File 2412, an ironic slogan since farmers face some of the highest exposures to pesticides. Senate File 2412 was the 2024 version of the Pesticide Immunity Bill, and the Modern Ag Alliance is Bayer's agribusiness industry front group. Modern Ag Alliance includes corn and soybean seed producers whose products are genetically engineered.
Sorry, Jennifer, I think your slides aren't advancing. There we go.
Sorry about that. To be Roundup ready companions to glyphosate. This is how we knew months in advance before the legislative session that Bayer was already pouring money into a campaign for a bill to stop their multi-million-dollar losses from cancer lawsuits. And here are some of those ads that appeared around the state. So Iowa has a Republican trifecta in state government since 2017, so it is nearly impossible to pass regulations controlling pollution from industrial agriculture. We continue to advocate for a factory farm moratorium and clean water legislation, but we realized we could have the biggest impact this year by stopping harmful bills. So this pesticide bill presented an opportunity to unite the environmental movement in Iowa and to work with progressive farmers and cancer advocates. We immediately reached out to our allies and like-minded environmental organizations who could bring stakeholders, expertise, and more ordinary Iowans to this fight. Groups like Iowa Citizens for Community Improvement and Progress Iowa, who share our commitment to people-powered movements. We began holding weekly coalition meetings to plan a campaign to stop Bayer's terrible bill. Collectively, we put a lot of thought into our campaign strategy and how we could leverage relationships from previous battles in this fight. For example, even though it's a Republican state, we thought conservative Iowans who oppose the use of eminent domain for carbon pipelines might also believe that people who suspect a corporation gave them cancer should get their day in court. Our first task was to create a catchy name for the bill. Our team chose the Cancer Gag Act, and this proved to be a critical decision because the name captured the horrific intent behind the bill and made pesticides synonymous with cancer and silencing victims. We also crafted a message that was clear and easy to understand. The Cancer Gag Act would deny cancer patients and their families the right to obtain justice in courts from the pesticide corporations that harm them. Bayer is attempting to protect their profits after paying tens of billions in settlements and jury awards to people who got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma after using Roundup. And legislators must make a choice between their Iowa constituents and multinational, multi-billion-dollar pesticide corporations. Next, we educated our volunteers and lawmakers about the bill. We held 2 webinars last winter with invited experts and attorneys to go over the evidence linking pesticide to cancer and the chilling impact that the bill would have on current and future lawsuits. We wanted to make sure that our supporters understood the bill clearly and could speak with authority. This map, which was used repeatedly in presentations, represents additional cancer cases that can be attributed in a single year to agricultural pesticide use patterns. It shows a clear correlation between cancer and pesticide application rates. So Iowa has the second highest cancer rate in the country. The cancer rate is increasing faster than any other state, and Iowa farmers apply more pesticide than any other state. Pretty much everyone here knows someone with cancer. So by the time the legislature convened in January, we were ready. We mobilized hundreds of Iowans to travel to Des Moines for a rally and lobby day to stop the Cancer Gag Act. Turnout was key to making sure that we filled the state capitol rotunda. And together, our organizations brought a couple of hundred folks to fill the rotunda. However, this was also a solemn occasion. We wanted Iowans who are experiencing the devastating effects of cancer with their families to tell their stories, to bring home the reality of how the cancer crisis plays out in real people's lives. People are losing their lives, and filing a lawsuit is a long and arduous process. No one does this for frivolous reasons. Nick Schutt, who you heard from earlier, is one of several folks who spoke about how cancer stalked his family in rural Iowa. We also wanted to honor the grief and loss that people carry from the experience of losing loved ones to cancer and provide a shared outlet to channel that energy so we could demand dignity and respect. After volunteers from across the state shared their stories, we held a vigil and people laid flowers on an altar to remember lost loved ones who they came to fight for. Beyond the vigil, a lot of effort went into planning the rally to stop the Cancer Gag Act with our coalition partners. We created a newsworthy event by framing the story and the photos. For visual impact, volunteers made huge banners and signs. We included music and chants in the rally to make sure lawmakers in the Capitol heard our collective presence. And I'll let you hear that for just a moment. All right, so we were echoing throughout the Iowa State Capitol rotunda, and I'm sure the legislators upstairs could hear us. Sorry. So the So we were, sorry, I can't advance my screen, but we were there to lobby, and everyone received a lobby packet. We went upstairs and talked with legislators. We had letters and talking points and a brief training on lobbying about the bill. So our constituents spoke to their own legislators and joined groups talking with legislators from across the state. And we frequently hear from legislators that these personal interactions that they have with their constituents are key in their decision-making process. The rally itself also got a huge amount of media coverage. So it was perhaps more important than the actual in-person event. Our communication staffer, Phoebe Trotter, did a fantastic job of pitching this story. Television, radio, and newspaper outlets from across the state covered the rally and used our framing of the Cancer Gag Act to describe Bayer's bill. The public heard our message. They understood that pesticides could be playing a role in Iowa's cancer rates, and that the legislature should not deny Iowans with cancer their day in court against multinational pesticide companies. But we didn't stop there. We kept up the pressure, and the fact that the Cancer Gag Act was big news in Iowa and one of the most talked about bills in the legislative session was crucial to maintaining our campaign for duration of the legislative session. After the rally, we continued to hold biweekly volunteer action meetings. We held volunteer call-in days targeting legislative leadership and legislators on key committees that would vote on the bill. We drove hundreds of calls to key decision makers. And when we called Food and Water Watch supporters, members of other organizations, and voters in districts across the state, they had almost always heard of the Cancer Gag Act and were willing to contact their legislator about it. Our members took the fight to districts around the state by asking tough questions and bird-dogging legislators at weekend town halls. My fellow organizer, Michaela Mankel, held another press conference later in the session with the most vocal state legislators who opposed the bill and announced that over 30 different community organizations from around the state had signed on to a letter opposing the bill. And ultimately, we won, which is always fun. And it's also always fun when our opponents tell us exactly what tactics in our campaign they did not like. This is Pat Grassley, Speaker of the Iowa House and grandson of U.S. Senator Charles Grassley, saying that although this was just a bill about labeling, which was Bayer's messaging, some of the narrative that's out there distracts us from that. And his Republican caucus in the House is not sure that they can support the bill. So this campaign was a great example of ordinary citizens winning against a multinational, multi-billion-dollar industry because we spoke out, told compelling stories with a clear demand, and held lawmakers accountable to represent their constituents. As Kat said, we later found out that Bayer spent over $200,000 in Iowa in lobbying alone, and that's a lot of money here. But our narrative dominated the news cycle and featured real people facing devastating struggles against a villain that cared more about profits than people's lives. Bayer's paid ads with convoluted arguments rang hollow by comparison. But they have not given up. So Bayer has lobbied for similar legislation in 12 states this year. Cancer Gag Act bills failed in 9 states, passed in only 2, and a bill is still being debated in North Carolina. We are now seeing a federal version of the Cancer Gag Act language attached to a federal appropriations bill, and we're expecting the standalone version of the federal bill to be introduced again in Congress this year. So we're ready to take this fight to the federal level. Food and Water Watch is mobilizing volunteers and supporters across the country. And we'll drop a link in the chat to an action that you can take to write your member of Congress and urge them to vote no on the Cancer Gag Act. I hope you'll join us.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for walking us through the work that you did that led us to the victory in Iowa. I have to admit, I always get a little teary-eyed when you talk about the victory in Iowa. It sometimes can feel like us rural folks get forgotten or left behind as though we're somehow less important. And this is a really powerful reminder that when we all band together and tell stories like Nick did and do the research like Kat did and work hard to build these coalitions like you've described, we can continue bringing forward important wins. They have so much money, but people power is real. So thank you all for the work that we've done. As Jennifer said, our work isn't over. Please send a message to your Congress members. We have a message written out for you, and we put a link in the chat. Donate if you can. We'll put another link in the chat for that as well. And now let's bring Kat back on camera, and Jennifer, you can stay on camera as well, and we will start with our Q&A. We only have a handful of minutes here, and I know we've had a lot of questions come in, but we will get to as many of them as we can. Jennifer, one of the first questions that came in is talking about or asking what do you feel are effective avenues to increase awareness? So I know you've talked quite a bit about that, how we did that organizationally. Do you have any advice for any of us who want to increase our awareness or help others increase their awareness?
Well, first of all, thank you to everyone listening in tonight. You're in some sense already doing that by being here and taking the time to learn about this important issue. And honestly, a lot of what we did in Iowa was just ordinary folks writing letters to the editor, talking to people they knew beyond their legislators, but family members and other folks about this, and just showing up so that, we could create the events in the media that we're able to get coverage and to get us, what we call earned media, as opposed to paying millions of dollars for advertising. So I would just say, just keep up the fight.
Thank you. The next question I'm going to give to you, Kat, and it's kind of a simple question, but maybe a complex answer. Why is Roundup in Home Depot?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as I mentioned in my presentation, right, the majority of lawsuits against Bayer are coming from more small scale usage, right? Landscapers, residential use, things like that. And in an attempt to stifle these, Bayer actually pulled the glyphosate-based Roundup off of traditional shelves a few years ago now. So what you see in stores now at your regular store is a different formulation, right? So they switched out that active ingredient, they switched out glyphosate for something else. But that glyphosate-based product is still in use commercially, meaning it's still being sprayed across the country. And that's, of course, a major problem for those who live near agricultural land, right? People like Nick, people in Iowa who are still getting sick from it that way. That part is still ongoing, right? But it's also important to note that even though they changed it now, the latency period, so the period between you're exposed to the chemical and when you actually get sick, can be as long as 30 years for something like non-Hodgkin's lymphoma specifically, right? So if you sprayed a lot of Roundup 5 years ago, it may be too soon to feel those effects. But if you have this Cancer Gag Act in place, that individual would be unable to sue down the road 5, 10, 20 years, right, when they eventually get that diagnosis. So, even if it's off of some shelves, those harms are still being felt and can be still felt down the line.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just seeing a question come in. I don't know if you know the answer to this, but do you know if the changed formulation is the same as the version of Roundup sold in the EU?
I do not know off the top of my head. I would have to look into that a little more.
Okay, the next question I have here is for you, Jennifer. About a week ago, there was some news that the Des Moines Water Works, which is the utility for the capital city of Iowa, said in a news release that they didn't agree with the EPA's decision to rescind the impaired classification of 7 river segments in central Iowa. Can you talk for a minute about this and how it relates to the Cancer Gag Act?
Yeah, so the Des Moines Water Works situation is due to nitrate in the water, but it's all part of the same system of agriculture that we're subject to here in Iowa and the Corn Belt across the upper Midwest. And so if Bayer succeeds in getting some form of Cancer Gag Act passed, it would set a dangerous precedent for allowing big ag generally to evade accountability for agricultural pollutants that could be extended to things like nitrate. And we are now seeing big ag lobbyists and corporate mouthpieces push the narrative that nitrate pollution is natural because it comes from factory farms or soybeans, and not harmful at the concentrations agriculture is causing in our waters. It's the same tired tactic that they've been using with glyphosate and other agricultural pollutants for decades. And this time, people are not going to fall for it. And that's in large part because we've seen the history of lies in the pesticide context.
Yeah, thank you. Jennifer, I think this one is for you as well. You said that Bayer lobbied for similar legislation in 12 states this year, and that the Cancer Gag Act bill failed in 9 states, passed in 2, and is still being debated in North Carolina. What do these wins and losses mean when it comes to a national fight?
Well, unfortunately, if a version of the Cancer Gag Act passes at the national level, it will likely negate state wins. That said, we learned a lot in the fights in Iowa and in other states, and that can help inform our campaign at the federal level. And we'll be applying those lessons as we fight to keep the Cancer Gag Act from becoming federal law.
Thank you. And are there specific things that we're doing now to help us prepare for a national fight?
Our national volunteer program has already been mobilizing volunteers. I know they've had a similar webinar about the federal Cancer Gag Act. And because the federal bill hasn't been officially introduced yet, I'm sure there will be a lot more to come in terms of actions that folks can take to get involved in that fight.
Thank you. The stakes are high. What gives you hope that we can win this fight nationally?
Well, these are obviously unprecedented times, but if we can win in Iowa, where the industry is more entrenched than really anywhere else in the country, then we can absolutely win at the federal level. Just the threat of the Cancer Gag Act galvanized so many people in these 12 states where it was introduced. There was an outpouring of bipartisan opposition that was key to stopping the passage of this bill in these states. And we've also done so much to bring media attention to this issue. Any chance of Bayer sneakily passing this bill as a technical labeling bill without massive amounts of public outrage is long gone. Cancer is a bipartisan issue, and just like in the state fights, we expect there to be fierce opposition nationally. We're working to connect people with their elected officials to make that opposition known.
Great, thank you. Kat, we have a few people asking, how do they keep learning more and staying up to date with the research that we're doing?
Yeah, for sure. Well, for one, I would definitely encourage you to check out the pieces on this issue. So we have a fact sheet for the Iowa bill specifically, and then as well as a broader one for the national context. We also have a web piece. So if you're interested about learning about this topic, we have a wealth of resources already. And then to learn about future research, I would just encourage you to stay involved with Food and Water Watch, get on our email lists, join these great events like this. And yeah, and then you can always look for our older research on our website as well.
Thank you. I think we have time for just one more question. Jennifer, what can people do to follow the organizing work we're doing and join in this fight against the Cancer Gag Act?
Well, like Kat just said, you come to events like this. Remember, we dropped that message action in the chat, and so I hope everyone here will go send a letter to their congressperson and just make sure that you are on the Food and Water Watch mailing lists and open our emails, and there will be more to come.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Kat and Jennifer, and thank you everyone for being here and asking these important questions. Please join me in thanking Nick Shute as well for joining us and sharing his story. And Nick, I hope you saw all the support and appreciation coming through the chat when you shared your story earlier. Please join me also in thanking Kat Ruane and Jennifer Breon for joining us and sharing your research and your work fighting against the Cancer Gag Act. As we've talked about this evening, we will continue to face big challenges in this fight on the national scene, and we will continue to fight big ag and pesticide companies that are putting their profits before our health and environment. This kind of fight is exactly what Food and Water Watch does, and we will continue to do. If you'd like to increase the impact that you can have, please consider donating to us this evening. And thank you so much for your generosity. As I said before, we don't take any corporate funding, so we're not beholden to any special interests other than the health of our communities and our planet. Our support comes from people like you, and a gift today will help us continue to do this important work. And if you'd like to learn more about our work, you can register right now to join us for our next 2 Livable Future Live events, our September discussion about the health and environmental impacts of AI, and our October author talk with the authors of Poisoning the Well, How Forever Chemicals Contaminated America. And lastly, please stay on and consider taking this short survey that will pop up on your screen in a minute. I would love to know what you thought of this event, how we could make it even better, and what kind of speakers and topics you'd like to hear about and from in the future. And as a bonus, I will be sending out a free Food and Water 20th anniversary t-shirt to 10 of you who fill out the survey today. Thank you again for joining me tonight. Please watch your email inboxes. I will be sending out the recording for this event tomorrow. Take care and see you next time.